Hello everybody and welcome to History Bite number 145, dated December 30th, 2020. I'm Walter, your mobile historian and blue-collar scholar. This History Bite is entitled The Sexual Abuse of Black Male Slaves. Knowing what we know about American history, virtually everyone is aware of the sexual abuse endured by black female slaves at the hands of their masters. That is very well documented, very well known, and greatly discussed. However, what is not well documented, well known, or well discussed is the similar abuse endured by black male slaves at the hands of slave masters and others. Black male sexual abuse during slavery tended to take two distinct forms. First, by way of buck breaking, and second, by way of individual abuse from the master himself and or other members of his family. We'll start with buck breaking. Now, buck breaking was an inherently very degrading, cruel act of public humiliation, whereby a black male slave who displayed, a bit too much aggressiveness or hostility, was publicly raped by slave master, the overseer, or another black male slave who obviously had the trust of the master and the overseer. All right. This was a form of public homosexual rape. All right. And the purpose of this was to completely break this slave's aggressive nature, to dehumanize him, to make him feel less than a man, to reduce him of all his dignity and pride. Thus ensuring that he would no longer behave in the manner that led him to this situation in the first place. This was a very cruel practice and certainly lowered his stance in the eyes of other slaves on the plantation, as this was done, like I said, publicly. It was done so all could see, and I suppose to serve as a lesson to anyone else. All right. So I've often heard, arguments from people that, stupid arguments, I'll add, that, well, if he was a gay slave, he probably enjoyed it. No one wants to be raped. And even if the black male slave was gay, he would not have wanted to be raped. All right. And the fact that it was done publicly just made it all worse. All right. And yes, for the record, another fact that a lot of, especially black folks, seem to have a hard time digesting is that, yes, there were gay black male slaves. There were gay slave masters. There were gay overseers. There's nothing new about a homosexual identity. It has existed since the beginning of time. So why people think that that's a contemporary phenomena, I don't know. But that was the act of buck breaking. And indeed, it had a traumatic effect on most likely every black male slave who was subject to such treatment. Now, to the other forms of sexual abuse, like I said, black men's sexual identity during the times of slavery, would be challenged a great deal. All right. He endured sexual abuse from not only a potentially gay slave master, but also possibly from his wife, slave master's wife, or other members of the master's family. All right. there were lots of gay slave masters, folks, all right? Homosexual men, gay men, who regularly had sexual relations with their black male slaves. Of course, that the nature of such relationship was certainly helped if the black male slave himself was gay, but quite often that wasn't the case. Remember, but it didn't matter. A slave did not own his own body. His body was the property of the master. So a slave master could have their way with a black male slave as much as he wanted. In the same way, heterosexual slave masters had their way with female slaves. All right? No different. It's the same concept. All right? The only difference is you don't have to worry about a pregnancy occurring, engaging in sexual relations with a black male slave. All right? And yes, black male slaves endured the same type of sexual abuse. It wasn't optional. If a gay slave master or a bisexual slave master wanted to sleep with one of his black male slaves, and lo and behold, you would sleep with him or face dire consequences, I'm quite sure. All right? So that did happen, and it happened more than folks would like to acknowledge. All right? Now, you also had black men who were sexually abused by female members of the master's family. All right? Quite often, white Southern women who were married, were little more than the property themselves of their husbands, and they were often sexually neglected. And as a means of protest against their husbands, who would often go away for weeks and months at a time on business trips, they would indeed take advantage of that prospect and engage in sexual relations with one or more of the black male slaves on a plantation. Okay? And, you might be thinking, well, how is she going to take advantage of him? Well, it's quite easy, as a matter of fact. Remember, she's white, he's black. Okay? He's technically, under the eyes of the law, a piece of property that is subject to the authority of the master's family in all ways. So it wasn't a thing of her going to him saying, "Will you sleep with me?" No, it was, "You will sleep with me." Okay? And if you don't, I will say you tried to rape me. So he wasn't really given a choice. Okay? That's forced. That's coercion. Right? And yeah, I know what you're thinking. I'm sure he probably did enjoy it. Maybe, maybe not. Okay, no, few people, unless he was into the dominatrix type of thing, he might not have enjoyed being forced against his will to do this, especially knowing the consequences that could happen to him if this was discovered. Now, of course, a slave master's wife or his daughter or any other female members of his family who chose to have sexual relations with one of the black male slaves on the plantation obviously ran the clear risk of getting pregnant. Okay? And this did happen from time to time, probably also more than is documented. So when pregnancies did occur, okay, it put everybody involved in a tough situation. If it was the slave master's daughter, he would likely either keep her in the house until, she came to term and gave birth, or send her to another state so she could give birth and have the baby, and that'd be that, and give the baby up and then come back home. If he kept her at home in the house until she gave birth, they'd probably either immediately sell the baby or kill it. Yes, infanticide was more common than you think, okay? So it was rough, all right? Now, if it was the slave master's wife, ooh, boy, yeah, not good. And that baby would obviously coming out black. So, in all likelihood, that baby would probably face the same consequences due to the actions of the mother. Baby has to pay for the crime. The baby would likely be sold or killed, okay? And goodness only knows the type of wrath she would endure from her husband, okay? But that's married slave women who abused black men on plantations. Okay. Female plantation owners, okay, did this, quite often with impunity. Okay. They regularly had sexual relations with the black male slaves on their plantations. All right. White female plantation owners who were unmarried, typically, the only thing they had to worry about was, of course, getting pregnant and, of course, other people finding out. It was something that had to be kept on the hush, regardless of whether it was a slave master or a slave mistress mistress, of course, being a woman, engaging in sexual activity with male slaves on the plantation. Now, everybody and their great Aunt Louise knew that, white slave masters had relations with their female slaves. I mean, they had litany of kids by them, all right, producing kids all the time, all right, lots of mixed race kids on plantations. But sexual relations between male masters and female masters with black male slaves, regardless of whether you were gay or straight, this was something that had to be kept exceptionally on the hush. Okay, no good would come of this, especially, being a female slave master having relations with one of your black male slaves. Your standing in society would plummet, okay, if anybody found out about that. And it certainly would do no better if you were a gay male slave master having such relations with your black male slaves, okay? But my point in all this is saying that the sexual abuse of black male slaves happened just as much as it did with black female slaves, okay? And like the black females, there was little to nothing the black male slaves could do about this. They were property, which means they were subject to the total domination and control of those who owned them, okay? And it is painful for a lot of people to discuss this as opposed to the sexual abuse of black female slaves, because it kind of weakens the image of the impenetrable black man, all right? And, it destroys the mindset that black men could not be sexually abused. Black women could, but black men, no, of course not. Bottom line is, during American slavery, black men were sexually abused just as much as black women, all right, by both male and female slave masters, okay? And it is something that it is an inconvenient and unpleasant truth, but it is something that has to be faced. We, I guess some just find it easier to digest because women are seemingly more likely to be victims of sexual violence than men are. But I will say it again, during American slavery, black slave men were the victims of sexual abuse by their white slave masters and slave mistresses just as much as black women were. And when we realize this and accept it and begin to discuss it more, perhaps it will lead to greater understanding of it and less embarrassment and less insecurity about the subject as a whole. But it did happen, and if you didn't know that it happened, I'm glad to be the one who presented it to you. All right? So if you have any questions or controversies, please feel free to leave them down below and I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you so much for listening to this History Bite. If you have not subscribed to my YouTube channel, just hit that little red subscribe button and that little bell and we are in business. Again, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate all of your support every time you listen to one of my videos. You're the best. Take care. Stay safe out there. And I'll talk to you at the next bite. Peace.